Good evening, good evening, good evening, and thank you for joining us here on blackdoctor.org. I am Ellis Dean, your host for this, much needed discussion. Let's talk about it. We're going to talk about mental health and particularly for our children. So before we get into that, we've got a wonderful panel assembled for you tonight. A couple of things I need for you to do. Number one, if you missed the first panel, you missed a treat. So please go back and watch that because it talked all about the vaccinations that your children need. And so that is vitally important for every parent. So please go back and watch that, but not right now because you're here. So a couple of things I need for you to do. Number one, let us know where you're watching from. We'd like to know where people are watching us from all over the world. So if you would just give yourself a shout out, give your city and state a shout out in the comment section. We definitely appreciate that. Number two, if you know somebody that needs this information, please tag it, share it on your page, get this out to as many people as possible. As you know, we're in the mental health age. Let's just call it what it is. We're in the mental health age, and we need to help our kids who are struggling with, who could be struggling, and we're going to help you understand the differences between adult mental health and children mental health. I see LA is already in the building. And the third thing I need for you to do is ask questions. If you have any questions that come up during tonight's broadcast, please drop that in the comments, and we will try to get as many of your questions asked and answered. If we don't get it done during the show, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the fact. So I know you didn't sign on just to see this lovely face talking to you this evening. So let's go ahead and start introducing and bringing on our guests. So first up, we have Dr. Waridi Parsons. She is a PhD from Cedar Sinai, our good friends at Cedar Sinai. Good evening and welcome. We also have Dr. Vashawn Williams. He is a dual board certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. We also have Linda Anderson, I believe. Nope, Linda's not here. Linda is here, yes, sir. Linda Anderson, she is an LMFT from the state of Illinois. And we also have Mr. John Brown. He is a mental health, he's a healthcare advocate, a good brother here helping us from Black Men's Health. So he's definitely here for this discussion. And we finally have Dr. Shay Alexander. A lot of letters after her name. Dr. Shay Thomas. A lot of letters after her name, but she's also LMFT. That is licensed marriage family therapist. And so welcome you all to tonight's broadcast. Got everybody say something at once. Okay.
Hello.
All right. So let's start with Dr. Shay. What are the common misconceptions about mental health in the Black community, particularly for children?
Good evening, everybody. I think some of the common misconceptions about Black children are the same misconceptions about Black people, that there's an overall negative connotation and this kind of doom and gloom perspective on how we're doing. And on top of that, it's their fault. It's our fault. And so one of the things that is beautiful about awareness events like this is that it sheds light on the many factors, systemic racism, cultural factors, family factors, and the like, to really give more context and more compassion to the situation. So some of those issues are around the stigma of mental health. Some of those issues are around access to services, connecting with fitting, so finding fit, right? And so those are just a few.
So Dr. Williams, I know as a psychiatrist, you are not only just dealing with children with regards to counseling, but you're also potentially having to medicate a child. What can you help parents understand when it comes to that line that says a child could benefit from medication or could benefit from just strictly counseling?
Well, thank you again for having me tonight, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to shed important light and information from a group of professionals that look like the community of people that we're trying to reach. I think along the lines of what Dr. Thomas mentioned with the misconceptions, even further with that, within our communities, oftentimes the misconception may be that mental health is different than physical health, that they're separate things. And it's actually sort of a part of our overall wellness and health. So some of our approaches definitely try to look at just the overall wellness and the overall well-being for individuals. And when we think about that, the way we approach things from a medical perspective, from a psychiatric perspective, is usually looking at what we call a biopsychosocial vantage point of formulation. That's biologically looking at medical people, but psychologically looking at sort of therapeutic, emotional pre-covered, and social looking at other factors. So we try to look at all those factors when making decisions about treatment. So one of the misconceptions oftentimes is that if you go and talk to a mental health professional, they're going to try to put you on medication. That's not always the case. Thorough assessment and diagnosis and evaluation oftentimes will lead us to looking at that perspective and seeing which things we think are appropriate. Sometimes that may merely be just some direction as to what people need to have and some guidance for different things that people need to have. In particular, parents maybe teaching and training. Sometimes that may include working with a therapist, working with a specialized type of therapy that may be beneficial to individuals. At times, that may include medication as a part of the treatment process. I always think of it as a treatment pie when we're looking at it. One of the things independently does not really sort of do everything that's needed when we're treating mental health illnesses because they can affect so many parts of our lives. So we look at a number of different things when we're looking at creating a treatment plan. One slice of the pie might be medication. But life skills and working on other things are very important. Pills don't create skills, but they can be a effective part of maybe possibly treating something that may be a biological issue that may exist, that can be a health disturbance, that could be a imbalance of something with regard to sort of chemicals that may be feeding and presenting as a psychiatric.
Okay, well that's great. So parents, y'all hear this. So there's going to be some biopsychosocial kind of formulation that he's going to have to make that determination with regards to if your child's going to be medicated or not. There might be some red flags that you send up, parents, if you go in there seeking to medicate your child. Right? So let's let Dr. Williams and other professionals make that assessment, and then they'll advise you whether or not your child may be put on medication. But don't go there seeking it. Oh, he's hyper, he's ADHD. Let's get him on some medication. That might be the result, but let them do an assessment. I know you have an assessment. You're there with your child every day, so I'm not trying to discount your assessment as a parent. But let's let the professionals do the assessment, and because there is that whole biopsychosocial assessment that they're going to do that we might not be doing as lay parents. So just respect the professionals with what they're doing. So, Ms. Parsons, what are some of those kind of that children are facing that could lead them to having more mental health challenges?
Well, I work for Cedars-Sinai, but I work for a program where I am at 2 schools. I'm in California, so I'm in both of the schools in Watts. And I think one of the biggest issues that most of my students, and I think it's like 89% of the population, they're facing poverty. So we're talking about complex trauma, just one factor, just the poverty. We're also talking about domestic violence, a lot of other factors that these children are going through. They're come from families that don't have a father. Most of them, the statistics are, they're out there for most of us. Most Black children are in the homes without fathers. And then, we're also talking about home ownership and things like that. So, we really need certain things to survive. Maslow is one of the great psychologists who brought that to light about having the basic needs. And so when we're talking about our children in the populations that we're serving, the Black children, they're already at a deficit because they don't have the basic needs. Their parents don't have the, money to get food for them. They don't have housing. They're homeless. There's so many different barriers that our children are facing on top of going to these schools that, you know, kind of are not giving them the basic needs, essentials. They're not getting the education on equality, on an equal level. So there's just a lot that these children are facing. And that's one of the things that we're working with in the schools, is helping them to understand that, you know, these are actual issues and problems. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to, you know, deal with them on your own. We are providing resources so that we can actually provide some stabilization to get these people to work towards mental health goals. It's really hard for you to work towards, you know, reducing your anger and reducing depression when you can't eat every single day, when you can't pay your bills.
That's an excellent point. I mean, we're talking about those that if you're old school like me and you build off that Maslow hierarchy of needs, at the bottom is food, clothing, and shelter. And if those are unstable, there's hard to progress through to that self-actualization, which is at the top.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to that, to where we're at a space of peace mentally when we don't know where our next meal is coming from, or we don't know where we're going to stay? Because last week we was at grandma's, now we're at aunties, and we're nomadic in terms of our living situation. So that does pose a problem and can add undue stressors that we don't really, sometimes we suppress. And Dr. Williams could talk about that in terms of, and that impacts our overall physical health. And so that's that connection, that psychosocial, physical connection, is that we're stressed all the time. Parents are stressed, that feeds to the children, and that can impact their health. Another stressor, Linda, I'm coming your way, is, let's call it what it is, racism, right? It's society. We're Black in America. We're talking to primarily Black audience. There is, and without getting too political, there has been statistically speaking, there has been a surge in pushback against progress that Black people have made over the past 50 or 60 years. And I'll just say it like that. And so how do you think that impacts the children of parents that are going out and living it and experiencing it? And I'll add the other piece, and John, I want you to kind of piggyback on this too. How does social media play a role in adding to those stressors? You're on mute. I want to hear this. You're on mute right now.
I'm trying to unmute my mic.
We got you. You're up now.
You got me? Okay.
Yes.
So my background, I'm an LCSW in Illinois, and I work for Department of Children and Family Services in the clinical division. So the children that I see, they're mandated to be a part of therapy. And these children have seen generational trauma, which means their trauma is based on their parents' trauma, based on their parents' trauma history. So it's very hard to recognize when you're in distress. And of course, therapy is the last thing they want and feel that they need, because they're acting out of trauma responses that is typical for that family, that generation. And when we look at racism, our community and children who are growing up in violent communities, impoverished communities, there are no services. That zip code has nothing to offer these youth. So therefore, it's a waiting list. It's a cookie cutter treatment plan. And every child impacted within certain impoverished communities, low economic, comes up with the same diagnosis, the same medication regimen, and just the same old. And then you're faced with, why are these children not getting better? Why are these youths instead of improving? But then when you look at other communities where the socioeconomic status is high and they're functioning, they do well. Their mental health is managed well. There is a greater outcome. And so what we're trying to do now is try to find strength base. As outside the community or even the school? Is there a teacher? Is there someone, although they're on a waiting list for treatment, are they in treatment, but the treatment is not going well because the therapist is saying, I'm still bonding. How are you still bonding after 4 months? There should be some establishment, so we're getting providers who are like, okay, this child is severely traumatized. What is the expectation of them getting better? So they're judged on that. They're judged on their diagnosis. They're judged on their trauma history, as well as the generational trauma, and they're basically written off.
So you mentioned something that I want to help our audience that are watching us understand. Trauma response. Can you give us an example of what that looks like in real life?
So when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we also talk about developmental, where a child who does not have a trauma brain, no trauma impact, no history of seeing domestic violence, of seeing parents abusing drugs, or being physically abused or sexually molested. So a kid who hasn't gone through that, who's typically going through their developmental stages, when they're faced with a situation of conflict, they're pretty much going to react within that developmental range. Now, a child who has a trauma-infused brain, when something happens to them, it escalates to the highest capacity. You're not going to be able to calm this child down or soothe this child. It takes approximately 7 to 10 hours because they're escalated. This is the only way that they can respond. So if you have a foster parent who is typically in the mindset of, hey, I got a 6-year-old who is off the chain, kicking the walls, throwing, spitting, they want this child out of the home.
Right.
So out of the home into the hospital, and I can't deal with this child. So we're trying to look for foster parents who do not match that trauma response, meaning they stay regulated. They understand what this child brain is experiencing, and they're able to respond appropriately. The children that I see from ages 3, and it does bother me when a 3-year-old is put in a psychiatric unit, a 3-year-old. But then we're not talking about a typical a typical 3-year-old that's going through the developmental stages. We're talking about a 3-year-old who has a trauma-infused mindset.
Thank you for that, because I really want people, because sometimes when you're in the profession, you use the jargon, and everybody on this call do what trauma response is, but somebody that's watching might not understand that. So thank you for helping that and helping people recognize what that is. So John, I asked the second part of that question is about social media and the influence that it can have and the impact it can have on, as an adult, it impacts my mental health from time to time, just in a way. So what does that do to a child that is still developing, a developing brain in terms of developing who they are, their self-esteem, all of those different things? How can social media have an impact on their mental health?
Yeah, man. It's rough for our kids, right? We are not. My wife reminds me all the time, like these boys that we're raising, right? We have 3 boys, 17, 15, and 9. And she reminds me all the time, these boys are not you, right? They did not grow up like you. Very, very different path and journey. And I think one of the things about social media that's so impactful is that how immediate it is, right? I mean, just immediate, right? I mean, even if something happened when we were growing up, something might have time to simmer overnight. Maybe it didn't reach it to everybody, things of that nature. This stuff is happening, in the moment and being communicated in the moment through whomever's lens, right? So that is crucial and critical for our children. And you know, it's something that we just have to cover our children, and protect our children, and really just continue to pour into them and lift them up, and just you know, create, just strengthen them as much as possible. I think it's critical. Even this, Ellis, what we're doing, right? You know, in the pandemic, when everybody's, you know, zooming in a box and education and things of that nature, one of the things that I reminded people is that, you know, you drive up, and we notice, especially when we talked about, you know, that development range for children, right? They are obviously not as developed as us as adults and things of that nature. But, you know, a kid's driving up to school, and pretty much the kind of presence and the kind of intimacy of what's going on at home kind of stops at the curb, right? Like maybe what they're driving or their parents are driving and things of that nature. But when they get out, you know, they can pretty much be kind of safe at school. What happened in the pandemic, especially with all this Zooming and stuff like that, you are in somebody's home, right? And I mean, that's just right. So we're in, even when we're doing sessions, we were doing some youth leadership things. And even the way we have to be just mindful of and empathetic with, but somebody is talking to Ellis, and they're like, through an exercise, oh yeah, they can, you know, they can use their laptop, and then they can use another device. And then I'm like, what are you talking about, right? I mean, everybody doesn't have 2 or 3 devices, right? And or somebody is sitting in a room and they're sitting in a corner, and you realize that they're being intentional in sitting in that corner, right? And they are staying on mute, and then they come off of mute. And when they come off of mute, you hear it's clear that there's 3 or 4 other people in the room, right? I mean, things like that we have to be mindful of, that these kids have gone through or are going through. Another kid, and again, because everybody's, you know, at school, everybody's looking at what else somebody's got on, or, you know, what somebody else is driving, or what kind of bag or shoes somebody has. And, you know, again, we got a kid sitting in the corner right here trying to be on mute because they probably got brothers and sisters and mother and daddy in the same room during the pandemic. And then another kid is sitting in with uninterrupted glass behind them, right? It's just like, I mean, you are seeing the differences. So yeah, it's crucial and critical. And we just have to cover these kids. The immediacy of this information and the way information can spread so fast is you know, something we have to contend with. And it's just a reality that we have to work through, and you know, make sure that my boys know, look, you can control what you can control. You can't control everything somebody says or what somebody, you know, is talking about you and things of that nature. We just have to keep building these kids up.
You know, and because there's and I'm not paid for this endorsement, but there's a book, it's called The Anxious Generation, and it talks about, this book really talks about how social media in particular has impacted the way children think, interact, behave, all of those things. And my son's school used this book as to set a policy that they will not allow them to have their cell phones on during school. And of course, you know, he's in high school, so of course that was problematic in and of itself. Yeah. What? No phone, no TikTok, no swiping. And then the teachers, they said after 2 weeks of this, just 2 weeks of this, they recognized a more interaction, the students amongst themselves, better interaction, because now they're having to recognize that what they're doing, they get to see the real results of what they say and what they do to somebody in real time. Social media allows you, you know, I saw a comedian one time, and it was a brilliant thing. And he said, social media allows you to be mean without the consequences.
Keyboard cowboys.
So you're mean to somebody and you've hurt their feelings. You don't get to see their feelings hurt. So you say, oh, so I just get to be mean without the repercussions, without having to deal with that hurt feeling. And that can build and build and build. And now we've got all these, as John said, keyboard cowboys. So Dr. Thomas, I will come back to you, John. Dr. Thomas, how do you tease out and incorporate a child's context when many of us on this call did not grow up with the context of social media being part of our childhood?
Absolutely. To your point about recommending books that you're not getting kickbacks for, I have two more to recommend. There's one that teaches us as adults about the impact of how our functionality impacts our kids, and it's called digital minimalism. And there is another that is catered towards kids who are into video games, called How to Raise a Healthy Gamer. And what's interesting is we blame the kids or we feel guilty ourselves, but the industry is designed and set up to, and I'm borrowing this quote from one of the books, colonize our child's mind. And so in the same way that we talk about the kid is always on the phone or on the game, we have to think about, and I'm saying this as a parent of a teenager myself, we have to think about how we're glued to our laptops.
Yeah.
You know, I have a 14-year-old. I can't fuss at him for doing this and not answering my questions if I'm always like this, you know. And so one is to understand the nuances of technology, but to also understand that, yes, it's a different world and technology is not the enemy, but just like everything else, what kind of boundaries and guidelines, and first and foremost, what kind of self-awareness do we have about ourselves as well as them, and in terms of coming up with a healthy balance.
So Ms. Parsons, I'm gonna get real. I'm gonna get real just for a moment here. I've been Black my whole life, and in my household, being quiet was rewarded. The kid, when you was quiet, you got left in the room. Nobody messed with you because you was quiet. That was the goal. And I hope my mom not watching because I'm calling her out right now. So the kids that was always noise and acting a fool, they got a lot of attention. The quiet kids didn't. That's part of the culture. How do we help our parents that are watching this program right now recognize that may be doing damage to their child because they're finding something to do or finding something to engage in that you might not know about. They're just quiet at doing it. And so that might be on the internet watching adult-related content that they should not be getting. That could be them being mean without the repercussions, or being bullied, being on the receiving end of mean texts and tweets and Instagram posts. So how do you help parents recognize that you have to engage with your children, whether they're quiet, and get beyond that, they quiet, leave them alone mentality that many Black parents have?
I'm just a big promoter of self-care. You know, I explain to parents about the importance of taking care of yourself. I'm a parent as well, so I understand what it means to, you know, feel like you're losing your mind every day because you have a child. But, you know, I laugh, but I say it, you know, with all seriousness because it is important. And so I think, like Dr. Shea said, it's just a lot of modeling. You can't expect your child to do these things if you're not doing them yourself. You have your child, you know, you have needs, you have things that you need to do, but your responsibility, your primary responsibility is your child. And I think that's one of the things that I've seen that's a big difficulty in the school setting. Them thinking, okay, I'm leaving my child here. It's the teacher's responsibility. You are your child's best advocate. You are the person that knows your child the best. Yes, I am an expert and I have all these letters behind my name and blah, blah, blah. But you know your child the best. So you know your child, if they're doing something wrong, you know as a parent that you need to periodically check on them. You know that as a parent, you need to also interact with your child and play with them. It's a really delicate balance and it's really tough, but there needs to be a lot more engagement with our parents. And that's something that I really work hard to do at both of my schools to, you know, kind of disarm them and be on the yard with my Jordans on, like, hey, you know, I'm Miss Parsons, I'm a therapist. And they're like, oh, you're a therapist? Yes, I'm a therapist. I want to work with your children. And that's really been really awesome for me in helping to just kind of remove some of that stigma about what they think a therapist is and what a therapist looks like and what a therapist has to be, and get those parents engaged and kind of open that door, like you said, Ellis, to show them and teach them some of the things that they need to do. But again, you know, it's the parents. We have to understand that we need to take accountability for our issues, for our hangups, for our difficulties in order to be the best parent that we need to be. So one of the things that I also talk about is frustration tolerance. You know, it's really difficult to go day in, day out at work, and then you got to come home, take care of your kids. So yes, if you are stressed out and you're having a rough day, you can't pay the bills, it's hot, your kid had a bad day at school, and you're going to come home and, explode. Maybe you should stop and just go get you ice cream or go get you a donut or something, whatever it is. I don't want to say like, that, but maybe take a walk or something, whatever it is that you need to do, because you have to understand that you're a human being too. And so in order to be that parent and to be present, you have to take care of yourself.
So Dr. Williams, and I said this when I had my first child and I had the second one, God forgot the operations manual with the child, right? So they don't come with the operations manual. I was looking. I think it came out, but I didn't see an owner's manual come out to help me with this whole situation. So how do we, and I want you to give parents some cues to look for that says, hey, my child might need to go see a psychiatrist. So like, what are some of those telltale signs, whether they're neurodivergent, which is a common term, and what are some things that they could be looking for that says, hey, this is not just my child is an introvert in terms of personality type. There could be something that I need to have a psychiatrist take a look at.
Yes, well, I think that one of the and very, very, I think, impressive and important points that everybody's made thus far. I'll say that never before have we had a generation of kids like the generation we have right now. Never before has there been a generation that's been exposed to as many forms of stimuli on a daily basis coming from so many different directions as these kids have nowadays, whether it's the parents or the family members or friends or internet or video games or social media or whatever. There's so much coming at them from so many different directions. And they're trying to do their best to navigate through this and figure out what is and what's not okay, what information is not appropriate. So never before has a generation of children had to deal with something like this. And so they are faced with, quite I think a challenging task as they're trying to develop. But at the same time, never has there been a group of parents that have ever had to deal with this and know how to deal with this and know how to parent this, right? So we're sort of learning as we go along because it is new, and there hasn't been a manual set up for this specific, scenario. And I truly believe that that most parents are truly doing the best they know how with the information they've been given in life, right? That's not always good information. That's not always been healthy information, but most of us try to parent the way we were parented, or we parent based on the information that we've been given, right? And a lot of our parents, as we grew up over time, oftentimes there may not have been a lot of time to pay attention and to focus on a lot of maybe signs and symptoms that may have led to the fact that, hey, somebody may be struggling with something emotional, or somebody may be struggling with something with regards to just how they're doing behaviorally. So a lot of times, much of that was dismissed as, listen, you better straighten up, or you don't have any time for this, whatever. We don't have time for crying or things of that nature. And so they would expect us, hey, to sort of get in line and do what we're supposed to do. We don't have time for emotions and complaints about anything from a standpoint of that. So I would say that what parents, I think, need to be very attentive to is you look for, you know your children, as was made before, but you look for maybe significant and persistent changes in their mood, thoughts, and behavior from what they normally generally function like. And so that can be notable changes in their eating, sleeping, energy, self-care habits. That can be some functional impairment where they may not be doing as well academically. They may be falling off with regards to things they would normally do on a consistent basis and taking care of certain things. You may see some change in behavior. They may be either verbalized or observe risky, dangerous, or impulsive, potentially behaviors like that are just something that's sort of out of the ordinary from what you would normally see with your children. Oftentimes are initial signs that say, hey, okay, well, let me take a deeper look into this and see what may be going on with my child. There are several different symptoms that may be associated with many psychiatric conditions and everything. But, and whether or not we're talking about children that are feeling sad or down, drawn, whether they're having a hard time focusing and concentrating, whether they're feeling very anxious or you see it, but a major change in their functioning and and definitely some change in the way they're able to sort of take care of things they normally taken care of before. Those are things that we look at and say, hey, if that's affecting you and it's not just a small pocket of something happened, if it's ongoing, that may result in saying, hey, well, let's talk to someone, and sometimes you can start with your primary care doctor and they can do some general assessments and may make referrals for you. But those are things that may lead to us saying, hey, well, let's take a look and have at least a talk, an innocent talk with a mental health professional to see whether or not there may be something that we need to look into a little bit.
John, I'm coming to you next, but Ms. Anderson, how do we give our kids? That makes me think about something, right? It's when I was in school, I learned that a great piece of your vocabulary as a child comes from your parent, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't know if your parent doesn't give you the feeling term, right. And not just the happy and sad and mad, the easy ones, but frustrated, those type of words. We learn from our parents how to express our feelings. Mm-hmm. If we're not getting that, if the parent doesn't have the word, how do we give the children the word to be able to share what's going on so they don't have those issues that Dr. Williams is talking about?
Is that for me?
That was for Ms. Anderson.
Okay.
Well, I would say, first of all, I grew up, I'm introverted. I'm not really a people person. And so my mom was a school teacher, and we engaged, but my sister was the one who got the most attention as far as she was very active. So I was more withdrawn into myself. As a parent, I would encourage, because we know we're not their only influence. Mm-hmm. So I think if they're not comfortable sharing with the parent or the parent, because we're human, we work, and no parent wants to know that their child is in distress, because your immediate reaction is going to be in denial in most cases. We want healthy children. We don't want to know that there's something going on. I want my child to be as great as the next parent's child. So I think an outlet of having them engaged in other activities. So if you are not that parent that can totally engage with your child, or, I'm just not there. I work all day and I want a healthy relationship with my child, but maybe the other parent or someone who is a mentor. Mm-hmm. So your child can feel comfortable sharing things, and that person, or it could be an aunt, or it could be somebody that has you trust, and that child has a healthy relationship with. It may not be the parent. It could be that person. And then maybe that person can engage with their parent, and it becomes like a support system.
Ellis, can I follow up? I just want to give one small practical suggestion for individuals who may be listening. I think that's very important what's spoken about, and the fact that trying to be able to develop an emotional vocabulary is something that can be very, very challenging. And for all of us, period, because we don't grow up talking about emotions as much, right? And as kids grow, kids are very concrete, right? So it's hard to believe something that you just don't see, and it's hard to think about things in an abstract term that's not there. Emotional struggles aren't as visible as bleeding scars and broken limbs and runny noses and whatnot, right? So it may be hard to be able to talk about. But one of the things that I'd like to recommend, and one of the things I did with my children, I guess this is twofold. One, trying to make sure that you at least a couple times a week, every day a week would be great. If you can sit down and have dinner with your child. You guys can sit down and have dinner. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, whatever you have. Having hopefully an electronic free time for 30 or 45 minutes so you sit down and have dinner with your children as a family, I think it can be very effective if you can do it every day of the week or a few days of the week. When doing this, one of the, I think, most effective things as your kids grow is to get one of these sheets of face emojis that you can print offline or something. You can get a sheet of face emoji that goes through all different types of emotion. It has words under them, whether it's frustrated, happy, sad, exhausted, tired, what have you, right? Getting that and having dinner and then going around the table and allowing each person to say, this is how I felt today, and then talk about that is a great exercise on a regular basis of looking at many different words that talk about emotions and feelings and helping them develop that over time as they grow. What is critical, though, is that the parents have to also model it and tell how they feel on a daily basis so it becomes something that's natural and normal to them. It's a very cheap, inexpensive, effective way to try to be able to go around and help develop your child's emotional vocabulary and the adult's emotional vocabulary, so they have the words and the tools to try to be able to describe how they feel going forward.
I love it.
I would like to say quickly, I agree, but however, if you're not there as a parent and you're struggling in that area, please build a network of support. You know, that if your child can't engage with you, but they can engage with someone safe. Because again, we're not their only influence. We would love to be. You know, I say I know my child, I know what my child is doing, but when I'm not with my child, I'm at my office and my child is with other peers. I want my child, if they cannot talk to me, to be able to talk to someone that is going to guide them as if I would. We have to work. We have to work in the real world. We have to.
So John, you mentioned earlier you got 3 boys. I know each one of them are different. How do you, as a parent, you work? You've got a busy schedule yourself. How do you spend time with each one of them to make them each feel special, different? That you're giving them what they need from you, and not feeling stressed out because not only are you spending time at work, but you got to come home and spend time with 3 boys that are distinct individuals.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is rough and tough. I think especially for parents with young children, it's important for them to understand that and Ellis, I don't have to tell you this, Sean, I don't have to tell you this, the older they get, the less time you might end up spending with them, right? Because they get busy, they have access to vehicles later and things of that nature. So I think it's just about being intentional. Dr. Williams just said, about that dinner time, right? We have a family calendar, not the 9-year-old, but everybody else has a family calendar. And one day we got a message to hit the calendar and it said dinner, 6 p.m., right? It was from mama, right? And I said, oh, I know what's going on. Like she's counting the weekends, right? Like counting the Sundays of how many. We have a senior this year. She's counting the Sundays of how many we have to go, right? Because it's getting less and less. So yeah, just being intentional, man. I mean, and being accessible, whether that's our eldest or whether that's our middle, having real discussions, Ellis, you just said, especially if you're talking about feelings and emotions and also me really just paying attention and listening and understanding it does not have to be who I am, right? I mean, this is a different world. Friends are very different. They roll very different. Who they hang out with is very different. But we need, happy and whole children, right? And if we can support them and listen and pay attention, be present, that's important. So, and the other thing about that for me, and this is a whole nother discussion, Ellis, is I got a wife, right? And as my dad shared with me, and it's an important lesson for them to learn, and they have learned it very quickly. Like I loved her before I ever knew you, right? So let's not misinterpret the pecking order here, right? My dad said that to me before. Like I loved her before I ever knew you. So that's the order of priority here, right? So and also teaching them how to protect her and cover her and things of that nature. But yeah, we give them as much time and attention as we can. To your point, Ellis, that's very difficult. They also understand when we're absent or when we're here working or something of that nature. It is for them. It is on behalf of them. A lot of clear communication, but having that very open, accessible door. The middle, being able to come into the room, close the door, and talk for real, and not be trying to shame or laugh or just really listening and making sure that we can have that very real open discussion. I would much rather them have that discussion with us instead of, you know, with some boys that they, you know, are learning from the internet or learning from, you know, some older boys or something of that nature. No, talk to us. We have a lot of wisdom, a lot of, you know, experience and life behind us. We'd rather you share with us so we can share with you and raise these little mighty men. So yeah, just being accessible, man, and paying attention to who they are and what's important to them, and understanding they're not the same. That was a huge lesson for me. I mean, our eldest and our middle are 26 months apart. So especially as young guys, right, babies and toddlers, and it was really one experience, right? But just realizing how different they can be. Same household, same parents, same rooms, you know, things of that nature, and just being just north and south on different issues, east and west on different issues. So yeah, for me, just being present is critical. And that's something I remember about my parents. We didn't always have the most and all of that good stuff, but they were present, and that's important.
So, Ms. Parsons, how much of your time, if you have the parent that's involved in the counseling of a child, how much time do you have to help the parent do you have to counsel the parent when you're trying to teach them? Because when I was counseling, and just to full disclosure, at one point I was a counselor at the child adolescent center here in Atlanta. I would always tell the parents when they would sit down, I'd say, all right, I'm going to spend 40 minutes with your child and 10 minutes with you. And they would look at me like, what are you talking about? I brought my child to you. And I would tell them, well, and this is an analogy, and y'all can use this. Just give me credit when you use it. Is if you drove your car hard, and it broke down, you took it to the mechanic to fix it, and they gave you the car back, and you drove it the exact same way, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to break again.
Mhm.
What I need for you to do is learn how to drive it. So how much time are you spending with parents if they're there, helping them re-engage with their child in a way that's going to be healthy for them?
Currently it's minimal. Like I said, I'm at the school, so I'm school based, and I'm primarily working with the students. We offer parent meetings, but they're not as heavily attended. And I think that most of us here in this field understand what you're saying, is that parents don't understand the importance of that their children are in a system. And though I might be able to help your child, give them some interventions and some skills to help them work and cope better, they're going to go back into that system. And the system involves you, the parent. And so if the parent doesn't work on themselves, like I was saying, take care of yourself and do the things that you need, then the system, it just doesn't really work as well as we like it to work. And so I'm really glad that you asked me, because I was kind of listening to Dr. Williams and Dr. Anderson. They both made really great points. But like you said, realistically, in my situation, I don't get to work with the parents. And we actually have some of the tools that Dr. Williams was talking about. We have every single time one of my kiddos come into my group, we do a check-in. That's one of the first things that they do, and they really love that. They talk about how they feel, and we get to talk about that. I have 3 different ways to do it. I have the chart, like Dr. Williams said, with the faces on it, and we also have a lot of other tools that we, kind of. I was looking for something, just some fun stuff that we get to use and give to the kiddos. One of my favorite tools is we have a thing called conversation starters. Again, this is promoting that thing at home with the children. So although I don't get to have that direct contact with the parents, part of my job is to enable and to encourage those children to facilitate and create those relationships with the parents, to give them those tools. Here, mom, look who Miss Parsons gave me. She gave me this for us to have dinner together. And so you're getting those parents interested. And, like I said, I have about 40 kids at each school.
Wow.
The ratio as far as like speaking to parents is not nowhere near. So I have to work through my kiddos to get them to encourage their parents to learn these skills. And, I think we're doing okay so far.
So Dr. Shea, last question, and then everybody, I want y'all to start thinking about your final thoughts as we're getting close to the end of the program. Dr. Shea, how do we create, and one of the things that my wife and I talk about is creating a safe space for our children to come and talk to us. And so John alluded to it. One of the proudest moments we had was when My son was at a party, high school party, didn't feel comfortable because kids were doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing, called us to come pick him up because he didn't want to engage. And that said, wow, I'm glad he's making good decisions in these moments. And I'm glad he felt safe enough to call us and not engage in that space to do something or feel pressured to do something that he wasn't comfortable doing. And so, Dr. Shea, how do we help parents create that safe space in that relationship with a child that says, you can tell me anything and I'm not going to get mad even if it's something that I don't want to hear?
Yeah, I think that is a great question because we have to, in essence, and some people struggle with this, sometimes we have to reprogram ourselves based upon how we were parented and how what we feel like a child should and shouldn't say and a parent should and shouldn't say, right? And so it's pausing and it's reflecting and it's understanding the intention behind what you're trying to create and the power behind that. And so you create space by modeling that it's okay to be vulnerable. And everything that we've been talking about goes together. Because if you're pausing throughout your day, if you're making those connections, if you're using feeling words, or even if you screw up and then come back and do what's called a repair attempt. We talk about that with couples, but families, you know, we have to, parents, we have to model that we're human as well. You know what? I didn't mean to jump down your back. I had a rough day, but give me a minute and we're going to talk about XYZ. And so, because that's what we want them to do. We want them to be honest. We want them to be reflective. We want them to be open to growth and constructive criticism. And so it starts with us. And that entails everything from time management to comfort with vulnerability and a lot of other things. So just for the sake of time, I'll stop there.
What you're describing is self-awareness, right? We're teaching them how to be self-aware, how they're feeling
Absolutely.
in the moment and being able to say it out loud, right? And be
Yes.
comfortable enough to say it out loud. So this has been a great discussion. We could go all night with this because I kind of geek out about it. You see, I'm buying books just on kids stuff, just because. So as we're wrapping up, we'll start with you, Dr. Williams. Any final thoughts? Anything you didn't say that you wanted to say, or is there anything that you want to leave people with? If there's one thing that you want them to remember.
First of all, I think it's been an amazing, start to this discussion. Hopefully it can spark and provoke more thought and conversations for others outside of this and at home and amongst professionals, amongst family and whatnot, because it's so needed. I just want to make sure that we are aware that when we think about mental health, and whether you call it emotional, mental health, mental illness, behavior disturbances, and whatnot, it is a part of your overall health and wellness, just as important as your physical health. And we have to continue to grow to a point to make sure that we're attending to that and make sure that we are looking at trying to make ourselves aware of what it looks like. Try to make sure we look towards prevention and early intervention if necessary, because statistically our children are being affected at a disproportionate rate over the last 15 to 20 years as it relates to our dealing with mental health and dealing with mental illness, suicide rates, and many things that are affecting them in negative ways. We talked about the stresses that they're under, so let's try to be able to arm them as best we can and do what we can on our part and trying to be able to bring more awareness to mental health. And more of us that are doing this, I think, will make more people feel comfortable about talking about it. Familiarity breeds comfort. So if something looks like me, feels like me, sounds like me, I'm going to be much more comfortable oftentimes being able to sort of let down some of the barriers and being able to talk about some of those things. And for all of us, the professionals and the professionals that are listening, get out, be a part of your organizations, be a part of your community efforts, whether they're having regular discussions, whether they're having community fairs, whether they're having open dialogue, whether you're at schools. Get out and make yourself aware. If you have some knowledge, you have some expertise coming from us, I think we have ears open and people want to hear it and people can be familiar with it. Like I said, we want to provoke the thought to get people moving in the right direction to know that mental health is just as important.
Yeah. Ms. Parsons, anything that you didn't say that you wanted to say, or if there's one thing you want people to remember, they don't remember anything else.
What's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we as Black people have, for a long time said we don't need to do it. We can go to church. We just gonna pray it out. We just gonna, whatever we've been doing. And unfortunately, we are seeing that it's not working. And so we need to start to make access mental health. I think one of the resounding themes is modeling. And so as an adult, you have to model the behavior that you expect of your child. And in order to do that, you need to take care of yourself. There are a lot of organizations, there is a lot more access now to mental health services. I am not promoting myself, but I do have my own private practice as well. And Therapy for Black Girls is a really great resource for women to find a therapist. But with that being said, like I said, you have to do the work. You know what you need to do for yourself. So parents, please take care of yourself.
Amen to that. Mr. Brown, final thoughts or anything you want people to remember?
Yeah, I love what and thank you for hosting and facilitating, Alice, and blackdoctor.org. I love what Dr. Williams was saying about, familiarity breeds confidence, right? That's so critical. We speak all the time about just creating, especially related to mental health, more access and more relevance, right? Access and relevance. Those two things are critical. I mean, people need to know that they can, it's accessible, right? They can reach it. They can get to it, and also that it's relevant. That they're not on an island. They are not alone. There's somebody like them or something like them that they can access. So we do that at Black Men's Health through experiences, and whatever that looks like: a forum, a workshop, a conference, a small group setting, intimate at church, whatever it is. We try to create those opportunities. And we have done mental health first aid trainings. We have assisted with even and working on us doing teen mental health first aid, which I think can just be powerful. That peer-to-peer opportunity. We've done some black men mental health training, where we've had trainers come in and do QPR, question, persuade, refer, very similar to CPR, right? I mean, you don't have to be in a mental or a professional, an EMS or EMT, to help save somebody and keep them alive. So QPR is like that. Us training facilitators and liaisons in the communities, these gatekeepers in the community, making sure they can, really create awareness and be able to identify when people are having mental health challenges. And in general, we've also created some opportunities for just men's mental health check-ins, where we can bring, brothers together, men together in the community. And we have had sometimes where we had these meetings on Saturdays, the last Saturday of a quarter, created a cadence that made sense so we can, make sure that it was accessible to people. We have had men in the room, sometimes 7 to 70 in the same room. So an amazing experience to just talk through those things and make sure that men are whole. So, keep it moving. This is the work that needs to be done.
Well, that's a whole show. So we may have to run that back in Men's Health Month. We'll have a whole show on Black men and mental health. We got our own issues. I'm gonna speak on behalf of Black men. We got our own issues to deal with, and we'll work through those. Ms. Anderson, what's your final thoughts?
Well, in my practice, I see adults, and these adults have decided that they want to break the generational curses of mental health. They don't want to be ashamed. They are tired of hearing, oh, we're this way because uncle or aunt or cousin went to the club and got a Mickey. And no, that doesn't make sense. They want to be free. And I think dismissing the stigma that is something wrong with me because I have a diagnosis, and instilling a glimmer of hope and healthiness and wholeness that, it's okay. You can do this. And that's what I work towards. And that's what I instill in my patients in my practice.
Amen. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Shea.
Well, thank you again for this opportunity. I just want to give a shout out to organizations like this, because that is also what it takes. And if we can get back to the village mentality, there are so many ways that we can all chip in to address mental health and relationship wellness and overall well-being. I believe with the right, soil, every seed can grow. And that's our job as parents. That's our job as a community, to nurture our kids, to find out what kind of light and soil and water they need. But guess what? We can't do that if we're not taking care of ourselves. We can't pour from an empty cup, as the old phrase says. And so we have to check in with ourselves. We have to work together as a community. We have to find creative ways like music and movies and meet them where they are, to encourage them to be able to open up and to really come from a spirit of hope.
Amen to that too. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our guests here on blackdoctor.org. I want to thank our partners at Cedars-Sinai for a part of this support throughout this, and Ms. Parsons come from Cedars-Sinai as well. So we want to thank everybody that stayed and watched, and all the commenters. There were some great supportive comments. So if any of y'all need some self-esteem boosts, I would say go read some of the comments that are going on, and to really, years ago, I wrote a post about my son breaking. It's called "Breaking Generational Curses." To your point, Ms. Anderson, and one of the things, the way I ended it was I talked about the generational curses in my family, alcoholism, abuse, things of that nature, and I made a decision very early in my life I wasn't going to be that way. Not only for myself, but for my family. And to this point, I've been living up to it. But the point of the post was, you don't break generational curses by wishes and hope. You break them by action.
Mm-hmm.
And a simple thing as hugging your child could go a long way in helping them feel seen and safe.
Mm-hmm.
Change the course of your life. And so it's the simple things that really go a long way in helping your child develop a healthy mental, healthy state. So that's my final thought. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Healthy Kids Summit is still going on, so please go over to watch the next show. Share this on your page with a friend. Follow at Dr. Shay, at Dr. Shay Speaks to see that. Black Men's Health, look that up. Google that. Everybody here, they will help you. Even if you're not in that city, they can still point you towards some resources that can get you the help and that you or your child need. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see y'all next time.